One of the interesting things, though, I thought about that interview in the article was that Swen was talking about the difficulty of utilizing D&D 5e as a system, which I thought was an interesting comment. You shared with me an article a little bit ago. Before.
I did.
It was about Baldur's Gate 3, a game that we have both played. We did like it. I think, though, that Baldur's Gate 3 is one of those games... don't know if you've experienced this a lot, but it's like, oh, this game is really great. I will probably not touch it again because I don't like. It's one of those games where it's like, this is great. This is excellent. I don't think I can play it again.
You know what those games are called?
What are they called?
CRPGs.
They are called CRPGs, where you're like, this is a great game, and at a certain point you're like, I don't know if I can go back to playing it though, because it feels like a big thing.
I know we before did a video about how Baldur's Gate fixes a lot of the issues with CRPGs.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like at some point, if we want to in the future, we could do a video about the hanging problem of CRPGs.
Right. Why it's trickier to stay in them and stay with them.
Something to that. But that is not today's video. If you want to hear about our thoughts on how CRPGs need to be reworked as a genre, let us know and we'll consider doing that.
Today, we wanted to talk about an interview that Sven Vinke did with IGN, where he basically said that there will not be any Baldur's Gate 3 DLC. It was not that they weren't starting to work on it. They actually were starting to work on DLC. They were even talking about what they might do for Baldur's Gate 4, but essentially their heart wasn't really in it. And so they decided to not do that and to start to move away, not just from DLC, but even from Baldur's Gate 4, basically saying, like, you know, maybe it's time for a different studio to do it now. Like, if there's a Baldur's Gate 4, it can be a different studio, they can take it in whatever direction they want, and we're going to go to work on projects that we were working on before we did the Baldur's Gate 3 thing. That's it's kind of the end of content, official content for Baldur's Gate 3.
Yeah, and of course there's mods. I do personally hope that Larian will, like, release some kind of creation tools like they did for, like, Divinity 2 Original Sin.
Right.
For it.
Right.
If not, maybe modders can figure that out, because I know they have tools on their end, for Larian's end, like the level editor and stuff. So releasing something like that, even if it's not DLC, but like, hey, we're not making anything else, but here's the creation tools, make your own shit, have fun, it's D&D. That would be amazing. It'd be incredible. It would make that game last longer than Skyrim.
Yeah, it's sort of like in Neverwinter Nights from back in the day. Like, they did a creation tool for something similar.
Yeah.
Apparently, according to Sven, though, the team was actually elated to hear about this. I think that they were seeing the DLC not as an opportunity to tell another story, but as more of a slog that they would have to get through to try and increase content for the game. But basically, what he was saying is, we just feel like, you know, we made a game that had a beginning and a middle and an end, and we're happy with it, and we're going to move on to our next thing, whatever that next thing is, which we don't know. Some people have surmised maybe it would be a Divinity Original Sin 3, but they did not confirm that was what they were working on, that it would be something different and original, and so maybe not that, but we don't really know. This is kind of interesting because, like, some of the voice actors have said that they're not necessarily done with the characters, that they'd like to continue to play those characters. Neil Newbin has talked about, like, Astarion, and was like, I don't think I'm done with the character. I feel like there's more to that storyline. Amelia Tyler, who's also the narrator, had said, like, you know, she felt there was more that she'd want to do with it. One of the interesting things, though, I thought about that interview in the article was that Swen was talking about the difficulty of utilizing D&D 5e as a system, which I thought was an interesting comment. And the reason why apparently is because there's this huge power creep around level 12 that I think kind of throws off a lot of math for them. And so that was one of the reasons. High levels in a lot of RPG systems have this problem of getting very, very powerful very quickly until you're basically a demigod. So what are you going to do? I guess the question that I have for you is, how do you feel about knowing that there isn't going to be DLC for the game?
I'm okay with it. I think with how big and how varied your experiences with Baldur's Gate 3 can be.
Sure.
With how long the game itself is, I don't think that it's a bad thing they're not extending it.
Sure.
Because what are there, like, there's well over 80 hours of gameplay.
Yes, I think that there are people that could easily spend 100 or more. So, but yes, even if you were just doing the main game, I think it's 40 or 50. So,
yeah, and that's just one playthrough.
Yeah, and you can create new characters and play in totally different ways, and there's like, depending on the variations, there's like 50 endings or something like that, or more.
So, like, with that much variety in gameplay, and I mean, I don't necessarily envy playing the same campaign multiple times, even if it's in different ways. The different ways you can play that game, I think it's fine to not have DLC that would extend it further. Because then it's like, all right, well, how many different endings is this one DLC going to have if they're going to do that? Like, would you feel cheated if they made a DLC with one ending?
Yeah.
Or would you be okay with it? Because if one DLC needs to have, 50 different outcomes, that's a lot of work.
Yeah, I think that the problem that you run into when there's so many different endings, if the DLC was actually made to be post-game, which I'm gonna guess if they were working on it, this is the one thing I want to know is what the DLC was thought to be. I'm kind of curious as to what they were imagining the DLC to be. But if it is post-game, you get into a lot of problems when you have multiple endings. This was something they ran into with Deus Ex. Because Deus Ex has like 4 different endings. And when they did Invisible War, which is supposed to happen afterward, they basically had to craft a story where all 4 of the endings happened. In order for anything to make sense for Invisible War,
That or you need to have a canonical ending that is one of the options. And that's how other games do it too. It's like, all right, well, here's the options for you. For instance, Mass Effect, I believe. Here's a couple different endings, but the next game is only going to say that one of these was canonical.
If you don't have certain choices that you make. Those 3 try to keep them canonical just because you make the choices, and those choices do vary conversations throughout those 3. The place where it's different, obviously, is Andromeda, but what they did with Andromeda is that crew had gone off to a completely different galaxy before the events of the first one. So they know nothing of what happened, and they're not related to the story of the trilogy at all. So they kind of work their way around that to worry about the canonical.
But that's beside the point.
Sure.
One of the conversations that I've seen come up about them saying they're not going to do DLC or work anymore on Baldur's Gate was, when is a game being done enough?
There are games that definitely could use DLC, and there are ones that don't. I think that there are games that are perfectly fine being standalone pieces by themselves, and some where DLC is warranted. The thing that does annoy me, as I've seen in some cases in even more recent games, is the artificiality of creating DLC to extend the game when it should have just been content in the main game. Where they'll say, like, oh, here's DLC content that we carved out of the main game to make it its own product that you pay for later. There's one that they were talking about.
That's just a battle pass by another name, then.
There are legitimate reasons why I can see DLC. Like, I'll give it to, like, Borderlands. I think the DLC that they did for Borderlands, like, 2 and 3... I understand why they did that. Because what they would do is they would say, here's a DLC, it's going to a completely different area of the game, and we're doing a completely separate story with, like, you know, its own stuff. It's got its own stuff. You go to Tiny Tina's Wonderlands, essentially. You go to, you go to the Handsome Jackpot, or whatever. We're going to a completely different place, and we're doing this, and it's all by itself, and that's just part of the DLC. It has nothing to do with the main storyline. It has nothing canonical to work with. This is a separate piece that's just a piece that you can have for the game if you want it. Where I get annoyed by it is a DLC like Broken Steel from Fallout 3. Because what Broken Steel did was say, boy, our ending to Fallout 3 kind of sucked, didn't it? It just kind of ended and your character dies. Nobody liked that. Hey, I got an idea. Let's release a completely separate DLC that will make people pay for, so that you don't die, and that we go and we destroy the Enclave. That would be pretty sweet, wouldn't it? It's like, yeah, that should have been part of the main game, because you screwed up.
Is that like if the Mass Effect trilogy's ending, which nobody liked,
and they did the
had been like, hold on, we got this, we'll fix it, here's the DLC, you pay for it, and you can get the fixed storyline at the ending.
Here's the director's cut, you pay $4.99 for the director's cut, and we'll give you a satisfying ending to the game. That I don't like. I don't appreciate that at all. I think that there's perfectly reasonable reasons why people would put DLC on if it's something that is not really, important to the main game. If you make a full, complete game, and then you say, hey, we have a side project that's going to be like a different thing and an additional extended story thing that isn't really necessary for the main game. I totally understand that. When they did like Blood and Wine for Witcher 3, you have a whole brand new area that has a brand new storyline and that doesn't really relate except in just a few little places to the main storyline. It's a whole different thing. Great, cool, I understand that. That makes perfect sense. But when they have the kinds of content where they're just trying to put stuff that should have been in the game, then they're just trying to create artificial content that extends it out into the future. I don't appreciate it when we end up with a situation like in Borderlands 3 where they had a season pass, but then they came up with a season pass 2. because later on in the lifespan, they came up with the director's and developer's cut.
Yeah.
And so they created a brand new season pass that you had to pay for.
Skyrim Special Edition, Skyrim Anniversary Edition.
Sort of like this, yeah.
Skyrim on the Wii U, Skyrim on the Switch, Skyrim on the phone. Sorry.
Skyrim here, Skyrim there, Skyrim everywhere.
But to the point, I think it's fine to, like, stop development on a game. Obviously, if you've put a game into early access and then just stop, or did a Kickstarter that funded and just stop before the game's done, I don't think that's okay. I think if you have a product that people have paid for, especially if they've fully funded your project, for instance, they deserve you to finish that game, hopefully. I think that is a fair thing to ask for.
Sure.
But I don't think you're required to then continue producing for that product beyond, like, in this case, Larian. They being elated to not have to work on it more because of how much difficulty it was to do it. I feel like them crafting a game as quality as it was, getting all the accolades they did, I think they are pretty fair to say they want to walk away from that project.
Yeah, they,
many awards. Well, it was received better than anything. It made the industry go, shit. I think it's fair for them to go, we're done with this. This is a finished product.
Like, Baldur's Gate 3 came in, they really revitalized the CRPGs and the traditional kind of thing. People have been asking for a very long time if we were going to get a good representation of D&D 5e in a video game form. I think that they succeeded there. They are now the first game to have won all 5 of the major Game of the Year awards for Golden Joysticks, BAFTAs, Game Developers' Choice, DICE, and the Game Awards. They have won all 5 of them. That is something that Elden Ring and Breath of the Wild did not do. So that's quite an accomplishment. That should be something that they're very proud of. And I think generally, if you create a game that is complete, which should always be the goal, DLC should be like an extra project if you want to work on it. If you're trying to use the DLC to create a complete game, that's a problem. Some games can really utilize DLC because they come up with good mechanical systems that can be utilized in like a completely fun new way for DLC content. And some of them are just good narrative stories that don't necessarily need to have fleshing out or additional stuff to talk about. And if you're not invested in it, if the developers aren't interested in doing it, then it's not really going to be very good content anyway. DLC shouldn't be the industry standard of how we do games, where it's in the process from the beginning, where they're like, okay, well, we'll release the initial thing, and then these are the 5 content packs that we do after. That should not be the standard.
Do you mean Starfield?
I mean a roadmap of content. Thank you, Fallout 76.
Yeah, that too. You mean NPCs should have been in the game from the beginning? Oh, sorry. But no, didn't Starfield had announced that they had DLC in the works, being planned, worked on right now?
No one
and I'm sitting there going, maybe you should work on getting your game from a 61% positive score on Steam to not being a steaming pile of shit.
Yeah, get it up to an 80, man. You got to do it. I've spent plenty of time in Starfield, and I can tell you that, you got plenty of stuff to work on in that game before you worry about the DLC content. I'm sorry. That's even Cyberpunk understood that. That's why they did a lot of different content updates before they released Phantom Liberty. So that's a whole other thing. No, I'm fine with Baldur's Gate 3 not having DLC. The only thing that I wanted, like I was mentioning before, is I'm curious as to what they were conceiving of as DLC that they were already starting to work on, because I think for modders, it would be interesting to see what that was going to be and what assets were getting made, because I think that there's definitely people in the mod community that if they had the tools, like if Larian had tools for it, and some of the assets that they were working on, would definitely want to make a fan-made version of whatever the DLC was that Baldur's Gate 3 was
100%. I think if they had stuff they wanted to work on and then don't want to, if they felt like it, they could be like, hey, modding community, this is for you. Have at it. Good luck. It's yours. We don't want to touch it.
Here's all of the Lego blocks that we put together. You do something with it if you'd like.
Yeah. And there are definitely games that have done something like that, where they go, here's all the resources, have fun, it's yours, which is why I think if they do anything else with Baldur's Gate, the only thing I would ask them for, and one, is tools for people that are not modders to do campaign creation.
Mm-hmm.
I think that the game they made is huge. Like all the other Neverwinter and Baldur's Gate games had campaign and level editors you could do.
Mm-hmm.
And as someone who plays D&D, being able to take that, make a campaign in a game, make a world, have everything in there, and do that through the framework of Baldur's Gate would be incredible.
Yeah.
I think that would be a huge boon to the gaming community.
Yes.
And the D&D players. So I would want that. That's the one thing I would ask for.
Sure, absolutely.
That's if I had to pay for it, 100% would would pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. 10 out of 10 would bang. The thing about it is,
I
games...
think you meant 10 out of 10 would Eldritch Blast, but okay.
Yeah, that's true. 10 out of 10 would Eldritch Blast. Now we have the episode title. One thing is that, like, games like Baldur's Gate 3 feel like they're custom made for being a digital tool almost for a D&D campaign, where you could really utilize it in that way, and it feels like something that you could easily have a tool set for, and if you could make it available, I think people would really love to utilize it. You know, basically what we're talking about is like a Baldur's Gate 3 campaign builder mode, and you know, that would be huge. People would love that, especially with how many of us have to do online games. Being able to, you know, do an interactive thing together in the thing and take our individual characters in, and somebody would have to build the landscape. That would be a huge thing. I don't think they're going to do it, mostly because I know that Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons & Dragons, was building like a virtual tabletop tool set for...
But Hasbro sucks ass.
Yeah, but they do own the license to Dungeons & Dragons, so they might not want to do that, although I don't know why they wouldn't have just scrapped the project and say maybe we just do it as a Baldur's Gate 3 thing, because it's already, the toolset's there.
That joke's gonna be on us when someone in the comments goes, they already released it. This is what modders have made. It's a whole thing. And we're gonna go, oh shit, damn, okay. If you do know about that, please let me know in the comments.
We will take one of the campaign builder modes, please.
Yes, thank you.
No chaser.
One art, please.
Yes, I would like one art, please. Beep boop. Thank you for everything that you did for Baldur's Gate 3, Larian. I understand that you want to move on to the next thing, or at least what you put on hold. I'll be interested in it. I bet it's something to do with divinity.
I hope it's something new.
It sounds like they're actually going to... It sounds like they were trying to do something very different than what they previously worked on, which would mean it not part of the Divinity series. So, yeah. We'll see what happens, but interested to find out. Tell us how you feel about the end of official content for Baldur's Gate 3, and what you think the DLC might have been. It's still trying to figure out where they wanted to go with the DLC. I'm interested in what that was going to be.
It's going to be that rom-com type DLC that Mass Effect had.
Sure. What it's going to be is you go to Love Island or something, and it's a dating show all of a sudden.
Perfect. Asterion will do so well.